You're listening to Breaking BizDev with John Tyreman and Mark Wainwright. Conversations that break down, beat up, and redefine business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. And now for your hosts, John and Mark.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Breaking BizDev. Mark, how you doing today?
Good. We're at the time of the year where we're seeing some shifting of hours, daylight savings, other things like that, John. We just talked about it, so we might be a little blurry-eyed with this one, a little gruff in the voice. Who knows how this will play out, but thanks for hanging in with us, folks. Thank you.
Well, I think it'll lend itself well. If we're a little grouchy, this is a bit of a snarky episode too. So
It is.
I'm excited to talk about why proposals suck, why they can suck, and some of the reasons behind that, all the way from that first RFP into those final submissions and even beyond. So
yeah, even beyond. We might even get some people who are like, coming at this from like a wedding proposal. They come across do some search and they're like, why did they say no?
If they're regular listeners of the show, they'll understand.
Right. There are some amazing parallels between, the larger world of proposals and
that's true.
And our industry of proposals. But yeah, we're here to talk about specifically the sort of proposal process, why it is fraught with problems, and how you manage to just fall in line with this terrible process of selecting a trusted advisor. It's just so problematic. And there's a ton of individuals and groups out there who just constantly beat their heads against the wall around proposals. And so this is not an abstraction, John. This is a systematic problem. And we're going to highlight why day in and day out, your proposals just keep on sucking.
Mm-hmm. So let's unpack it. What's the big kind of high level takeaway? Like, what's the tip of the iceberg? And then we can just kind of start to drill down.
Yeah, we're going to deal with this in sort of a timeline of where did this thing come from, the proposal, and we're going to kind of walk through a timeline on it. But here are the big level points, and this should come as no surprise to people who have listened to Breaking BizDev. Clients write these proposals, and we just assume that they know exactly what they need, that they have self-diagnosed, to use that sort of medical reframing. They've self-diagnosed, so they know exactly what they need. So you're just going to read it and give them a price. The other thing is, right, these things often start looking like a big glossy brochure, right? It's a big marketing piece, and it's just not.
Makes it look pretty.
Yeah. And there's, the make it pretty thing right here. We're going to put the words in it. You just go, here, marketing person, go make it pretty. The other thing is, again and again, these proposals just force us to talk about ourselves. And I know that sounds weird. You're like, well, sure, Mark, how are we going to win if we don't talk about ourselves from cover to cover?
That's right.
So yeah, you just go talk about yourself. And if it includes some sort of a price at the back end, you've come at it wrong. You're going to give them one. You've done your spreadsheets, you've done your calculations, you've thrown your darts at the dartboard to try to figure out what price you're going to associate with this thing. And you just give them one take it or leave it price. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. So you give them one take it or leave it price. And, right. It's the last one is like, this isn't a conversation. It's right. Well, we think that sending this thing off, whether it's some big glossy brochure looking thing or just some pieces of paper, we send it off in an email and cross our fingers and say, okay, let's hope for the best.
Now we wait. The funny thing is these are all topics that we've covered in the past.
Yeah.
And we're weaving them together through the lens of proposals.
Yeah, they all come to a head, right?
Yeah.
So it's just bad. So, all right. So let's walk through these.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So if we go all the way back to where these proposals originate from, and most of the time it's through that kind of RFP, RFQ process. So that's our first kind of landing point. Like if we go back in our time machine, let's go back where all these proposals begin. Where does it start? Where do proposals start to suck?
Yeah. from the get-go, right? So it's to go back to that first thing, right? Is that we just assume the client knows what they need. And so the proposal starts with the client organization. They have a need, they have a problem, whatever else that they need to overcome. So they do their homework and they start to sort of self-diagnose. Who knows? Maybe they've had some outside expertise come in and help them with that little thing to kind of get them going. It's like, yeah, you have a problem here. You might have some ways to solve it, but it typically starts with the organization. The organization goes through this process where they're sort of self-diagnosing, and then they say, okay, we've got an idea of roughly what this problem is. Let's get it down on a piece of paper and let's send it out, either broadcast it or send it out to some organizations with all the bullet points of what we need and what we want them to do and that sort of thing. And we want to do it in a way that we can hopefully minimize price and schedule and scope and all that kind of stuff. We don't want this thing to get out of hand. So it starts right there, right? It starts with this self-diagnosis. And sometimes that's off the
hold up. Time out. So it sounds like part of this is that when firms get into this scenario, they're too quick to jump the gun to estimating and building like a service design, right? So there needs to be a little bit more emphasis upstream even. And so I'm thinking like, what about that go, no-go process?
Yeah.
Right? Like, should we even bid on this RFP?
Sure. The go, no-go is when the organization that needs some help sends it out, it lands in your inbox and you read it really quickly and you kind of fudge about how your expertise is a fantastic match for what these needs are, whether or not they are.
You look for reasons why and not why not.
Yeah, right. That's well said. It's right. Just in case people didn't hear that, right? We read these solicitations. It's just go.
It's ingrained in us, right?
Here's all the whys.
We want to go after, we want to grow.
Yeah, here's all the whys. And we rarely touch on the why nots, right? Because the why nots are like downers. It's like, we don't want to. Of course we could win this thing. So you get it. You start reading through it. Your go, no go is just fraught with problems. We've touched on the go, no go in the past. They can be totally gamed. You know, some people have these fancy score sheets and so they're
on the scales.
Right. They're problematic. So, right. I don't know how many legs of the stool that we're kind of dealing with here, but that's the one, right? It's like the solicitation shows up, the request for a proposal shows up in the organization and it's fraught with problems, but we ignore them. And then the go, no go kind of happens and we're going to go. And that's problematic. We're like a half step into this whole thing and we've already blown it.
A lot of times in these requests for proposals, like you said, the client has sort of self-diagnosed what they think they need.
Yeah.
And then what they're looking for is to shortcut that whole sales process and what would be finding the right solution. Because a lot of times these buyers, they don't know what they need. They know what they think they need, but they don't fully understand a lot of the implications. And that's why, as experts, you should be in a position to consult your clients and discover what their needs are.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is you haven't had the conversation. You haven't had the ability to have that back and forth with the client to really stress test, dig below the surface, kind of push and pull a little bit on the solicitation, the question that they have, the problem that they have in front of them. You haven't had a chance to work that. They just kind of came up with it and now they send this whole thing out. And I've used this analogy and we chuckled about it the other day when we were talking about it, but the client has set a trap, right? So this solicitation, and we'll touch on this again and again, John, because there's a lot of these. You're picturing yourself walking through the woods, right? And your trail is littered with bear traps, these big, gnarly, rusty bear traps. And we step right into them all the time, right? And the first one we step into is that we just assume the client knows what they want or what they need, right? Whatever the solution is. And people listening to this that have some experience are saying, no, Mark, we know the client doesn't know best. We know we're going to go and second guess, but that's not how we act. Right. At the end of the day, we just take the solicitation for what it is verbatim and we just spit back out at them, kind of like what we think they want to hear. That's our first trap we've stepped in, John. We've got our ankle securely snagged there with the big bear trap.
The big, rusty, gnarly steel bear trap. Yeah. And, the hard part about all of this is the river's flowing at this point. It's going to be hard for you to row upstream because the client, they believe that this is the process they need to follow. This is their buying process. So any deviation from that is going to cause, maybe not frustration, but just kind of stepping outside of what they're used to.
Yeah. We're already moving.
Yeah.
Things are already moving. There's timelines, there's schedules, there's competition, there's this deadline, there's this, right. It's just going. There's no time to say time out. I mean,
so you got that gnarly steel bear trap around your leg and you're off down the river.
Yeah, forget it. Yeah, yeah. Do we mix metaphors there?
I think we may have, but just to drive the point home.
Yeah, so. Brutal. Yeah.
All right. So you stepped into this trap of
there it is.
Even just responding to this proposal in a way that puts the client in the driver's seat. So let's go into that second stage where you're actually kind of like building the proposal. Maybe it wasn't the right decision to go for it, but you did. Maybe it wasn't the best thing to follow that same process and structure, but you're going to. Yeah. And now it's time to build the proposal.
Yeah. So the proposal is a response. It is the second half of this whole sort of if-then logic thing, right? The if is the beginning, and, right or wrong, it's like, if this is what the client needs, then this will be our response. So we have to react to that if part, meaning that the client has their needs, has the bullet points. This is, the situation. This is what we need, right or wrong. We have to translate that into our world. And we need to say, we need to create an understanding. And the translation is our understanding. So the client asks for something. We have to read it and process it and think about it and understand it. And then we have to react to it. And then we have to create the proposal with our response. And where this is so problematic, why the situation that we find ourselves in is so problematic, is that we kind of skip over that sort of moment to read, understand, reflect, and create this sort of well-sorted understanding that is the foundation on which we build our response. So we get this document, this request for proposals. We have to read it and understand it. And, if this was great, this would be happening in a conversation. If I heard you right, solicitation folks, potential client, this is what you think you might need, right? If I heard you right, if I understood you correctly, this is what I think you need. But we don't have a chance to do any of that. So we have to... Right. We have to just create an understanding on our own and then jump to the proposal part. The thing I'm trying to highlight here is we have to make sure that we are explicit about our understanding. We have to create that connection between what they asked for and what we're going to recommend, which is what I've called in the past a statement of understanding. And that needs to be a critical part of the proposals. Anybody that I've worked with, all the clients out there, if you've done any work with me at all, you know that this is something I pound my fist on the desk about. It's just, you have to create a statement of understanding in your proposal every single time that says, we heard this, we understood this, you gave us this background. So this is our understanding. And the reason you do that is at the very end of the understanding, you say, did we get that right? Is there anything we missed? Right. Again, that's fantastic to use in a conversation, harder to use in sort of this document. But what you want to do is you want to show the client everything you've understood, and then you go to your proposal, because they need to know if you started out right. If you started in the right direction. Oh yeah, those guys got it right. They got that point. They got this. They understood the background. Good. They see where we're trying to go. Great. They understand. Now we can go to the recommendations. But if you start off wrong, if you didn't understand the question, how can your response be right? So that's
exactly right. Because the flip side of that is, they understand me, is, no, wait a second. How did they get to that understanding?
Yep.
And then it becomes like an interest, but did we tee that up right? Like, did they infer that from the RFP that we sent out? And then that becomes, a moment in time where you can recalibrate what those expectations are and align on what the core problem is. And maybe that's different from what they originally thought.
Right. So that's that, right off the bat, right? We have to start with that understanding thing. We skip right over it. We just go to the response. We start crafting, we start creating the solution. I have heard so many times consultants, whoever they are out there, whether they're engineers or architects or advisors or whoever else they are, it's like, there's some line they sneak into the cover letter. It's like, oh, we've already started coming up with the solution. We've already started solving this. Sounds fun if you're a client. They're like, oh, they've already started. Ooh, great. They've already started the solution. This is fantastic. But lo and behold, we find out that the solution that they're trying to craft started off wrong. It was like that whole sort of compass setting on a boat, right? If you're 1 or 2 degrees off from where you want to go, by the time you've traveled the required distance, you're well off track. You've missed it. You've missed that little wonderful island you were going, and now you're floating in the middle of the Pacific. And you're like, wait, I thought we were on track here.
I love it when we use sailing analogies for sales topics.
Yeah, we've done that in the past. I don't know.
Yeah.
For the sailors out there, they get it, right? If you're just a little bit off, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, right, foundationally, lack of understanding, the lack of sort of articulating that understanding, being really explicit about it, that's missing. Because, oh, by the way, the client never asked for it in their solicitation, so we're not going to give them the understanding. You have to. So that's that part. And then this next chunk, John, is just something that always gets my goat.
Yeah, we talked about it and making the proposals look like a brochure.
Yeah.
Make it look pretty. And I've heard that used so often in my experience. Just make it look pretty.
Yeah. And, I love marketing and proposal professionals. They're good folks. They're talented. They do hard work. They do not just hard work.
A lot of grunt work.
Yeah, they do a lot of grunt work. There's a lot. They do nearly impossible work, when
herding cats.
Yeah, totally herding cat. Trying to get their SMEs to give them information to put in proposals and updated resumes. It's really tough. But the problem here is a lot of the people who are proposal professionals inside of professional services firms are sort of trained and early career sort of marketing communications people. Like their past, like their training has been in marketing communications. They use Adobe InDesign and Photoshop, and they're coming at this from a creative perspective, and they want to make a document that reflects that creativity. So it ends up looking like a glossy brochure. And proposals, folks, proposals are not marketing tools. They are sales tools, right? And that's not to say that your sales tools can't look nice, but rather than leaning super hard into graphic design when we're talking about proposals, what you really need to do is lean into information design, making sure that the information that you're communicating in your proposal is legible, understandable, is concise, that you can sometimes present and represent these complex processes or complex ideas using whatever it is, simple graphics, simple tools inside of that proposal to help your client simplify these complex problems, right? And that doesn't happen.
And that's not to say also that there is no room for a marketing slide deck. You can use a pitch deck. There is a use case for that. I would even argue that you probably don't even need that, and that those graphic design skills and resources would be better applied to your firm website, honestly. Yeah, because that's that's the front door. That's the entranceway.
Yeah. You're listening to Breaking BizDev,
the podcast that beats up, breaks down, and redefines business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. Your hosts are John Tyreman, founder of Red Cedar Marketing, the podcast marketing company for experts and professional services firms,
and Mark Wainwright, principal consultant and founder of Wainwright Insight, the fractional sales manager and sales consultant to professional services firms.
If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by following the show and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts.
And now, back to the show.
So yeah, you're right. Information design. How do you structure the different options, the different, timelines of your project and all of those things to convey information in a succinct, efficient way?
Yeah. So that's often missing. And again, no, I'm not casting any shade on anyone here, but John, if there's any marketing proposal professionals out there and just one of them catches hold of this and is like, oh yeah, right, I need to be much better at information design than graphic design. They're different things, right? And I would hope that people start rethinking that. So building the proposal, it's lacking in understanding. It starts to look like a brochure, and it's that other. There's a trap, right? There's that other trap, right? The first gnarly bear trap was the fact that we just blindly assumed that the client knew exactly what they needed. The second one here is, and you stepped right in it, is that the client solicitation, this request for proposals, basically says, hey, for 20 pages, talk about yourself. And we step right into that.
Yeah. Instead of reflecting back the client's scenario, what they're faced with, the problem that they're faced with, and how they would approach solving for that. Instead, it's here's our work and here's how we're different than our competitors.
Yeah. And in the proposals, a lot of times there's an approach section. It's like, here's the recommendations. And the recommendations are always, here's us and here's what we'll do.
Right.
Rather than, and this may sound different, this may sound the same, rather than here's you, the client, and your problem and your needs, and here's what we're going to do with you.
Yep.
Right.
Here's the outcomes you can expect as
here's
a
the
result.
outcomes you're trying to achieve, and here's what we're going to do alongside of you in aid of you. Right. I mean, this is professional services, John. We're here to serve. The work we do is not ours. In professional services, it belongs to the clients. Right. We're just simply walking alongside them, helping them, guiding them. So that is a reframe. And if you read through, anybody out there, if you've worked on proposals, you have one maybe sitting on your desk right now or on the screen, right? Just read through that thing and you're like, holy smokes, we talked about ourselves the whole time.
Yeah, I love doing this as just a quick kind of spot check.
Yeah.
Look at a page in your proposal and look at the amount of second person language to first person language.
Yeah.
And that should be a 2-to-1 ratio. You should be talking about the client and them and you and yours, way more than I and we and us and ours.
Yeah. So it's that highlighter thing where you're highlighting all the sentences that are about you and about them. And yeah, on balance, we step right into that trap, John.
All right. So we've stepped into a gnarly, rusty steel bear trap, and then we've fallen into a river. And now we've gotten caught by a rusty hook in the other leg.
Oh.
It's just dragging us down.
Yeah,
all right. What's the next trap that we're falling into?
But yet we persist, right? We're still
Wile E. Coyote.
We're still going to win. We're still, we've got this. Yeah, we're in trouble. Right, we're starting to lose. We had that compass thing going on. We were degrees off. Like we've got a mess on our hands.
Oh my gosh!
And then we've got this last little part. We've got the last little part of the proposal that we have to find out, which is like, all right, we got to come up with a price. Right, it's always like the last page. Yep. They got to come up with the price. Right, and I mentioned this before. Right, this is another trap. Maybe it's a trap we reached into with our hand or something like that. And the other trap here is that we come into this, we pull the spreadsheet out. We've seen all the spreadsheets when they do your pricing. You're like rows and columns, people, hours, dollars, due to calculations, everything. You scroll down to the bottom and there's the big number at the very bottom. We take that big number, we stuff all this sort of, here's all the stuff we'll do. We put that big number in the proposal and we cross our fingers.
PDF it and send it via email.
We're a high cost provider, John. If they don't take this high price, then, it's their fault and we don't want to work with them anyways.
And that's the only option that they have.
That's it. Right.
Take it or leave it, man. Yeah.
Conversely, we've talked about this at length.
Yep.
You got to give them options. Buyers need options. They need context. They need the low, medium, high. They need the soft, medium, hard. They need the basic, the standard, the enhanced. They need context in order to figure out, and this is the line I love, right? They need to figure out how they can work with you, not if they'll work with you. Right.
I like that
so
a lot.
you give them the options. They give them 1, 2, 3 options. It's, there's a spectrum here. They're not endless ranges, though. There's option A, there's option B, and there's option C. Now the choice is yours, prospective client. You get to choose. Yeah. So got to give them options.
Got to give them options. All right. So that was another trap that you fall into.
Yeah.
And there's some debris flying in the river and it's slashing you left and right.
It's a mess.
Man.
It's a total mess. Yeah.
But you're in it without a paddle. And so the price, and I jumped the gun a little bit, but that next part is actually submitting the proposal. So what are some of the traps that firms can fall into when they're submitting it?
When we are presenting our proposal, I can't see any other way, John. It has to be a conversation, because every time we send something off to the client without this conversation, there's a ton of misunderstanding, lack of clarity. They immediately have questions and we're not there to answer them. We're not there to see their reaction. So again, this whole thing is fraught with problems and there's no conversation.
I like this because it kind of blends with another one of the traps that we talked about earlier is the brochure and graphic design versus information design. Yeah. And I think this, like we've talked about 3 option tables in the past. And I think that's what you're alluding to here is, give
Yep.
the client 3 different options, low, medium, high. That is an exercise in information design, because designing that table, you want to convey the right level of depth with the right level of width in terms of those the range of different options. So that I think that just to put a fine point on and a tangible example of information design versus graphic design, sure, there's what's the color of option 1 header versus option 2, and there's some graphic design that goes into that, but by and large, that would be a good example of information design.
Yes. And, this thing gets sealed up or emailed off or whatever else. And, the group, has a collective sigh of relief. And we think, well, we did our part, but there's this last little part. And I think I've heard Blair Enns mention this on Two Bobs. We've kind of rained some praise on David T. Baker and Blair Enns on their podcast. Go listen if you haven't. Blair has said in the past that you need to be compliant with their requests and other requirements in their proposal solicitation process, but you can't be complicit to a bad buying process. So that's the different, right? You need to comply with what their requests are. Sure, you're going to get yourself booted if you don't, right? There's certain requirements, there's certain mandatories that you need to take care of. But you can't be walking alongside a really problematic process that's just fraught with bear traps and just be okay with it, right? This goes all the way back to the go, no go thing. This goes to submitting it and all these things. It's just fraught with all these problems. You're like, oh, man, I just wish this could all be different. I wish we could have conversations. Gosh, I wish we would have presented options. I wish that we could have seen the client's immediate reaction to the price and the scope and everything and had a conversation about it. So the process is fraught with problems, and you are, kind of an accessory to murder in this whole thing, right? You've just gone along with it.
Yep. And it seems easy, right? All we got to do is just read this. We don't even have to interface with the client very much. And then we can just do it all in-house and send it off. And that's what leads to low win rates and poor clients and low margins.
Right. But John, we know there's one more piece.
So what's the bonus piece of this all? You're telling me, Mark, that just hitting send on your email and blasting that proposal off, that's not the end?
No, because lo and behold, lightning strikes and you get a call that says, we'd like you to come in for an interview.
Shiver me timbers. You're telling me that we got to the next stage?
Got to the next step. Unbelievable. We didn't know the client. We did a terrible job at showing them we understand them. We gave them one take it or leave it price. We did all these things terribly. In spite of all that, they actually want to talk to us now.
How can we suck even more now? What's the next trap?
Right? What's the next trap? And there is one, John, it. We're basically paralyzed on the trail now with so many, we've got ourselves sort of entwined in all these traps.
We're survival mode now.
Yeah.
We've made it this far.
Yeah. But there's one more huge trap that we're going to stumble into. And that is, we get invited to the interview. The prospective client says, all right, so you're going to come into the interview. Here's a basic outline. We want you to answer these 5 questions or whatever else it is. And you just nod and say, oh, great. We've got a 60-minute interview and we get to talk about ourselves the whole time.
Oh my God.
Oh, the trap. There it was. That's the trap. So, right. So you pull out the slide deck and you do the images and you get your bullet points and you talk about this and you put little scribbly drawings or, big ideas up on the screen and you're waving your hands and there's the light show comes in and there are people standing up and talking and others. And, it's crazy.
It's like a performance. Then the fog starts to rise and a single beam of light comes.
Oh, could you imagine? You're in a selection committee in an interview and an architecture firm walks in the door and all of a sudden the lights drop and the smoke machine starts and there's a big spotlight and lasers kind of going all over the place. I don't want anybody to take this seriously because somebody out there is thinking, oh
wow, what a point of differentiation.
Lasers, of course, lasers, right? The lasers.
Right. Anything but talking about the client.
Yeah. Oh, anything. Right. So yeah, right? What should be happening otherwise, right? In all seriousness, this is potentially the first time, unfortunately, that we've been in the presence of the prospective clients.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do everything we possibly can to avoid that trap of talking about ourselves for the 60 minutes that they've graciously given us, and figure out a way to talk with them, to have conversation, right? To get to know them, to introduce ourselves to one another, to make sure that we understood things correctly. It's like, look, in our proposal, hopefully you provided a really clear understanding, a statement of understanding. Now it's the perfect time to say, look, in the first 5 minutes of the interview, you've done your introductions. Everyone said hi to each other. You just ask them, hey, did we get that right? We gave you our understanding and we weren't clear on some things, other things much more clear, but did we get that right? And then you stop talking.
You shut up and listen.
You shut up and listen, right? And hopefully there's an opportunity for them to, at a minimum, get some head nods. And best case scenario, you get a little back and forth. They say, yeah, well, most of it was good, but there was this important thing and that important thing that maybe you could have hit on more, or this is something that most of the teams really, really missed, and we were hoping people would hit on that. Then all of a sudden you say, great, now we got to talk about that thing, rather than just assuming that we nailed the understanding and everything else, and we're just going to go yak, yak, yak. Next slide, please. Right? So that's key, right? We're in the presence of the client, and we have to avoid the trap of walking in the door and talking about ourselves.
Because that could be the decapitating move that just takes you right out of the
Takes you right out, right? We've entangled ourselves in all these traps, and that could be the one that does you in, is that. Right. And I will ask firms, I do not participate in interviews. I help some organizations that I work with do some preparation work leading up to these things, but not a ton. But the question I always ask when, there's two questions. Right. First one is, did you articulate your understanding, and did you ask them if you got that right? And the second one is, who talked more, you or them? Mm-hmm. Right. Was it 50-50? Was it really a conversation? Because I think most consultants want to come into an interview, have it being a conversation. They would really like that.
Right.
They would like it to be a back and forth. But, inevitably they say, no, we talk 95% of the time.
Yep. And that could be a product of just not understanding how to be in those situations, and not having enough reps in those situations. And that's what those reflections are all about. Right. And the value of working with, a coach to try to get you to that place where you do feel comfortable with silence and asking questions and leaning into some of those more awkward moments and trying to turn the tables around.
Yeah, good point. And we've got our big fat conclusion there, John, which, your proposals suck because they're all about you and not about the client.
That's right.
There it is, folks. Sorry, that's a bitter pill, right?
All right. They just listened to 35 plus minutes of us, and we could have just delivered that right at the onset. Well, yeah, I suppose we did, but we just unpacked it for them.
Yeah, we unpacked, we, hammered it home, we did everything else, and now, when people listen to this, hopefully people start to see the traps that are laid out in front of them.
That's the goal.
And begin to kind of avoid them. It's like, oh, no. We're not going to out. Yeah, I see that. Does everybody else see that? That client just laid a trap for us.
That looks like rust.
Yeah.
Are you up to date on your tetanus shots?
If not, we have to steer clear of this one because we don't want to get trapped in that.
Just listen to Breaking BizDev. That's all you need.
Yeah. There you go. All right. So there it is, John. I think we hammered that one enough. So yeah, proposals suck, and we don't even know it.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Breaking BizDev. Subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or listen to the show at breakingbizdev.com. This episode was produced by Red Cedar Marketing. If you think a business podcast is right for your company, visit redcedarmarketing.com to learn more.